Hi, welcome to another episode of ComSpeak. Today we have with us Deepa Dey. Deepa is the head of corporate communications at GSK Consumer Healthcare in India. Thank you, Deepa, for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We're going to chat about your professional story in the next few minutes and hear from you things that we haven't heard of before. Tell us about how you got into the world of communications.
So I was always very fond of words, whether they were written or spoken or sung or enacted. So words always interested me. And from there, a transition to communication was a very easy thing. So after I finished my post-graduation in English and I was doing my MPhil, I decided that I needed to do something which had linkages to expression, communication, etc. So journalism was the first port of call. And I started working in Calcutta as a stringer with Economic Times while I was doing my master's. And from there, the love for stories and, how to tell your story, how you listen to somebody else's story and represent them in a manner that is interesting, I think came about. So while I was doing that for some time, I was also deciding whether I should continue journalism or I should try something else, which is when Statesman at that point in time was looking for people, and I was one of the shortlisted privileged ones. And there was something that a headhunter told me, why don't you try your hand at PR? I had no clue what PR was. And I said, why not? I mean, when you are young and excited about the life that you have in front of you, I guess you try different things. And so that's how I just went for an interview. And during the course of my interview, I told my interviewer that I had no clue what it was, but I was willing to give it a shot. And I walked out of the door with the job offer in my hand. So I said, look, how many people are privileged to have something like this? So let's try your hand at it. And once I did that, it just kind of started building from there. I spent 4 lovely years working with a great team of professionals in Calcutta. From there, I moved to Bombay.
That was the Park Hotels.
That was
right?
Park Hotels,
Yeah.
yes. Then one fine day, I decided that, I have done something with the corporate. So it was a little bit of corporate communication and marketing communication at that point in time. And then I decided that let me just understand what the agency world is all about, which is when I moved to Bombay with Clear Public Relations. And I moved to head up something very different from the premium hospitality segment that I was earlier working with. I was working with for an infrastructure project of the Escomars. It was all about the dam that they were setting up, and probably there still is, at Indore, at Maheshwar actually. So from there, I spent about 2 years with them. I did a host of other clients, supported them in their communication requirements and needs. So it was Philips India Limited, CNBC, Escomars, as I just mentioned, then Singapore Tourism Board. So it was like a bouquet of stuff that you do when you're in an agency. And then from there, I met my then boyfriend, now husband, and we decided to get married and we moved to Delhi, which is where he was. And then I decided to take a short break and go back to corporate again. The choice was very clear. Since Nikhil was going to be with the agency side of the business, I decided to be on the other side.
Right.
And then I just joined back the same company that I was working with in Calcutta, started their corporate communication function for the entire group, which was another fantastic 7 years, which is also the time I had my son, enjoyed being a mother, and the company was extremely supportive. So at a time when not many people had heard of working from home, working part-time, I think my amazing boss allowed me to do all of that. And so that's been my journey. And thereafter, one.
And then you worked at 3 very interesting brands, SpiceJet, Airtel, and now at GSK Consumer Healthcare. Tell us about those 3, because they're completely diverse sectors, aviation, telecom, and FMCG.
Well, see, the way I look at my profession is that I need to learn, because I don't think growth will not come if you don't learn. And I believe that there is a value to being a subject matter expert, but I I find energized by learning about new industries and new companies. So I never repeat an industry. If you see in my entire career, I've always jumped from one industry to the next. Every industry that I've had the privilege of working with, has been excellent in terms of the different kind of things that they taught me. Like the Park Hotels taught me to be a challenger brand, and how do you challenge the big brands in Calcutta and take over and go ahead of them. With SpiceJet, I understood how nuanced your communication is when you are working with a listed company. That was my first listed company. When I was working with Airtel, I always before that thought that it's great to be a leader. Right. Challengers have it tough. Boy, Airtel told me being a leader and staying a leader is really, really something else. So I think those 3.5 years that I spent at Airtel, I just learned a lot more about being a leader, staying a leader, doing the things that a leader should do, shaping the narrative of the entire industry and not just your brands and your business. Right. So a lot of expansions, the scale and the depth that this brings up, you get when you work with the leader of the industry. I think that was another interesting learning. When GSK happened, it just opened up for me the entire arena of how communication is done in a global company. I'd never worked with an MNC before. It's always been Indian companies. And I just wanted to just expand my canvas and the horizon, and that's how GSK happened.
Right. So between hospitality, aviation, telecom, and FMCG, which is the toughest sector for a communicator to be in? Is there one more challenging than the other?
I think everyone has its challenges, but as a person, I don't look at the challenges. I think I look at where can I make the big difference. And whether it's at the time of a crisis or is it at the time when everything is going good.
So you've done almost all sectors. If you had a choice to choose another sector in the future, which one would that be?
Well, actually, I never chose any of the sectors that I have worked in. I've had I just went with the flow, and I personally believe that you should be like water in your life, because water is something that flows into everything and takes the shape of whatever it is. So the water in the glass is the shape of a glass. The water in a cup is the shape of a cup. So just flow into whatever opportunities you get and just enjoy it. I mean, just make the best of it. I mean, if you were to ask me where would I like to work, I would love to work with Walt Disney. But I'm not getting a chance to. Hey, if you're listening, I'm here. But if I don't, that doesn't mean I'm not going to make the best of what I am, because I think that's what makes life exciting.
So this year you complete almost 25 years working in corporate communications and many more years working as a professional. I think you'll do 30 in 2021 from your LinkedIn profile. What are the 2 or 3 campaigns that stood out for you on the ones you worked on in your 2.5, 3 decades of working in the world of communications?
So it's a very interesting question, because there are campaigns and there are campaigns, there are budgets and there are budgets, and there is this task ahead of you and there are those tasks ahead of you. But the one thing that I think that stands out for me a lot and I hold very dear to myself is my stint in Bombay launching the Oxford bookstore. The Oxford bookstore went into the market as a challenger brand. The good thing was it was located in a very, I would say, interesting neighborhood, which was near the various colleges in South Bombay. There was no budget. We were new in the market. Yet, we worked on something called partnership. It just showed me the strength of partnerships. Partnering with your community, with the colleges around you, with the neighborhood, getting them to come and increase your footfall. Partnering with various publishers. Partnering with people, like-minded people who brought in, strength of names like Amitabh Bachchan launched the store. Kareena Kapoor walked into that store and launched 17 magazine. Hema Malini was launching one of her books there. Rekha and Gulzar were debating whether the name of the industry of films in Bombay should be called Bollywood or not. And all this happened in that store without any additional funds being exchanged. You know what I mean? Right. So it was all partnership. So it just taught me the value and the strength of the partnerships. And I just also believe that the other partnership that I must talk about is the partnership with the agency. So I used to work with a fabulous team of people, and they kind of stepped up and they just brought fabulous ideas to the table. It was not just column CCs. I remember we did a book launch, actually, we did a perfume launch in a bookstore. Why? Because there's a book called Perfume. And everybody who came for that book launch went back with a small little bottle of perfume. You know, that's a memory that a lot of people after that wrote back to me and said, you know what, I've never gone for a perfume launch in a bookstore. And when I came back, it just stayed with me.
Right.
So how do you curate those things? So I think that is something that is I hold very dear to my heart.
Right. So that's a memorable campaign. What was the toughest campaign you worked on in your 25 years of working?
Yeah, there is. So at Airtel, I remember 27th of December, we were all on a holiday, much needed holiday, 6 o'clock, the phone rings. There is a crisis at the other end of that phone call, which was basically that the entire network in Bombay had shut down, which meant your customers, which were like the big companies who were sending their year-end data abroad, couldn't. People who were on a holiday could not book their tickets or talk to their families. Basically, we were dark in Mumbai. And that was my entire week. Year-end holiday was all about that crisis. But the good thing is that we quickly put together a team. And it was not just communication, it was communication, customer care, etc., etc. And we were trying to figure out how to connect with your customers, because if you're not on the network,
Right.
how do you connect with them? So we said, okay, website is up, let's connect with them through our website. So we started putting up updates on the website. We started tweeting our updates saying, you know, in the region of Thane, the network is working, so network is up. And then we would listen to it, and then somebody would say, you know what, I'm in Thane, it's not up. So then we would just immediately go back to our network team and say, augment it. Right. It's still not done. So it was a very close kind of a knit team that was always on call. Every 4 hours we were catching up on calls and then giving each other feedback. And so within 48 hours, we were doing a heat map, it was completely red. In 48 hours, it started to change.
So you've spoken about your work journey, you've spoken about your campaigns, you also mentioned about the boyfriend who became husband. Let's go back to your childhood days, back to Calcutta. Tell us more about how your childhood was like, where you went to school, where you went to college.
So childhood was lots to do with books and books. I used to be an avid reader, youngest of 3 kids growing up in a very conventional joint family. Always wondering what my life would be, because, you know, life, for me, it could not be within certain drawn lines. It had to be something more. Schooling, Carmel Convent in Calcutta, college, Lady Brabon College, university is Jadavpur University. Love of books translated into love of literature, English literature, masters in English literature, etc. So yeah, pretty much that. Spent a lot of time with my family. My father has always been an inspiration, and he and I used to spend the evening creating poems together, writing stories together. You know, so that's just been my childhood.
So I'll come back to circa 2004 April, and I don't know if the viewers know this. You're the oldest, not in age, but the longevity-wise, corporate communications person I know. So when I began my career at Genesis, a month into my first job, Nikhil joined the firm, and I think 2 days after his joining, you and little Neil, who's not little anymore, came to pick him up from work that evening, and I was sitting next to his cubicle finishing my work, and we spoke, I still remember, and I remember playing caroms in the corner with Neil as well. And it's been a long journey since then, 15 plus years that we have known each other. And I found that you've had a really interesting, colorful career, and we spoke of that a little while ago as well. My question is, if you had not chosen to be in the world of public relations and corporate communications, what would you have done?
Maybe a talk show host.
Wow.
Like you.
So maybe there's scope for you to take over from me in the future as well.
Why
and
not?
do a
Why
show
not?
Like this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about today's times, I mean, when you began in communications 25 years ago, things were different. There was no social media. Digital wasn't even known of in the way it is today. Things have changed rapidly. How have you evolved and caught up with the way this entire pace has changed rapidly in the last few years?
So I don't think storytelling has changed. So whether it was the very rich oral tradition of India where stories were told from generations to generation, the power of story will never go away. So I think the storytelling has not lost itself as a art. Yes, we are telling our stories differently. And for me, I think what has kept me on my toes is how fast I can adapt, how fast I can learn from my juniors, seniors, peers, everybody I interact with.
What do you do to unwind? You have a crazy life at work, and currently, we know from what we read and see, your current job is going through a lot of change and transition. How do you take some time off to do things that you love to do? What do you do for leisure?
So I do quite a few things. So first thing is that I love going for my walks. So I take some time off from the day and I switch off and I go for my walks every day 1 hour. When I listen to my music, I'm with my thoughts, I'm myself, and that's one thing. As a family, we go out for a very long walk on weekends and we explore new places. We go and explore new monuments in Delhi, new parks in Delhi. If we are traveling somewhere else, we just like to go and explore nature and the parks and gardens and stuff like that. I do read, watch movies, I write sometimes. So yeah, so
You
I guess
travel, you do a
yes,
annual
I
holiday.
love to travel.
You've
I
seen
just
some
love
of
to
those.
travel.
You've seen your pictures from
I
Japan
live to
last
travel,
year.
yes.
Yeah. There are a lot of youngsters getting into the profession, and the youngsters today, and you have a son who's in his late teens, are different from the youngsters we saw 10 years back, 20 years back. So there are two questions. Question one is, what do you see is the difference between youngsters of the early 2000s and maybe the late 90s and today? What's the difference? That's question one. And the question two is, what is your advice to youngsters of today who want to choose PR or corporate communications as a career for the future?
I think the youngsters of today have a lot of opportunities. When we had started our career, we didn't have this canvas to paint on. I think the opportunities are there. The ecosystem is ready and ripe for you all to just pluck that and use it to your advantage. And I think you should just embrace it. Embrace it and create your own style of working within that.
I have two more questions before we move to rapid fire and then wind up this conversation. Uh, so the whole, it's not again a private question, it's in the public domain. So you've been married to Nikhil, and Nikhil also leads a very interesting consultancy now. He spent almost 15 years in another leading consultancy. And you both have communications, corporate communications literally running in your blood, in your veins. How do you manage that at home? Because there's so much else to do as a couple, but there's a lot of work that you bring home as well. So how do you balance that out and ensure that there is time for things beyond communications and PR during your dining table conversations and otherwise?
So I think it's good in some level to have somebody working in the same industry. Then you can understand what is happening and understand that person a little bit more. You also get to share industry knowledge. You get to share interesting things that you may have learned, which Nikhil and I, we do. We do talk about things that we have learned consciously. And this is like a rule from the day we got married. We don't talk about specifics about our work. So to give you an example, there have been situations where I have been working in an organization and he has been supporting a client who's a direct competition. We have given undertakings to both our organizations and companies. And there are situations where you come home and your phone rings because there is one crisis in the industry and you both are impacted. I think our neighbors know a lot more about our work than we each other, because we immediately go into two different balconies. We would otherwise, or we go into another room. I have taken calls from the bathrooms. And I mean, we are very, very conscious and we are absolutely clear that we will just not let the organizations that we are committed to and bring that conversation into the marriage that I'm committed to. So we are very, very clear. It's not easy. The interesting part was that I was also Nikhil's client. And I think that was probably a huge challenge for both of us, because I think our teams had a very interesting time. I will leave it at that.
Were you also one of each? Were you his boss at Clear at some point?
No,
or
I was
Okay.
never his boss.
Only at home.
I'm his boss at home.
Right. Before I ask you my last question and move to rapid fire, is there something you wanted to share at this interview about your professional journey, which I missed asking you, and you think it should be here for posterity?
Well, I can only tell you that when I started my professional journey, where I didn't know where it would take me, it was just an overnight flip. And when I moved from one industry to the next, again, I did not consciously decide what I should do and what I shouldn't do. I have always been open to learning. I've always been open to moving in a different direction. And I think that's what makes my journey rich, which is what I would urge everybody who's considering this as a profession to do, because it actually allows you to do everything.
So I know where you will be on September 18th this year, because you were the one who told me 6 years ago that you should do practice in Kolkata.
Yes.
But where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
I think I would like to see myself connecting, nurturing, and growing talent in the profession that I am.
So thanks so much, Deepa, for these interesting insights and the conversation we have had. We'll end this in a few moments with a rapid fire. I have about 8 to 9 questions. You get 10 to 15 seconds per question at most. And we should wrap this up in less than 2 minutes.
Sounds
so
exciting.
I'll start off. Which is the brand you trust the most?
Neil Day, my future retirement fund.
Your favorite book?
Oh, I have got many, but the one that right now I can think of is The Great Gatsby.
Okay. The best boss you've ever worked for?
Priya Paul.
Cool. The best of all the companies you've worked for?
Oh, been privileged to work in all the companies, so can't name even one.
Who is your professional role model?
Professional role model, I have two. I had a boss, Leslie McGibbon, who hired me into GSK. I just loved working with him. He inspired me. And Minu Handa, dear friend and a great, great person to look up to.
Who's one communicator, Indian preferably, that you really admire?
Myself.
Amazing. I didn't have a doubt about this answer. A communication campaign that you wished you had worked on?
Well, every time I see something great, I feel I should have worked on it. But I do also know that I have worked on some brilliant ones, so therefore no regrets.
Okay. Your favorite holiday destination? One place you'd love to go back to again and again?
So I love to travel. This year I have New Zealand on my mind because of the nature. So anyway, that's great nature, great connect with nature. I love to go back. Scotland is another area.
Interesting. And the last one. Describe Deepa Dey in 3 words.
Fast, fun, and sometimes furious.
I've seen all these elements of you in the last 16 years I've known you. It was a pleasure talking to you, Deepa. Thanks for having made the time despite all your crazy life you have been leading the last few months. Thank you so much, and we hope to talk more about some of the things you spoke of offline in the future as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That was Deepa Dey, the Head of Corporate Communications at GSK Consumer Healthcare in India. Hope you enjoyed listening to her insights, her thoughts, her journey of life. Thank you for watching.